mentioned that they're very suited to a lot of the environments in West Texas and Central Texas that are rocky and rugged and have a lot of that country has what we would call palatable brush species. They don't really eat a lot of mesquite unless they're very young, which we have a lot of mesquite around us here, but many of the other brush species, even juniper and things, they will browse on those. Sheep and goats, you know, compared to like a cow, they have a very small mouth, and that helps them be very selective in the diets that they pick. So you see a goat, you see these pictures of goats sometimes climbing up in a tree, and some people think, well, that goat's hungry, he's climbing in a tree. He's actually climbing up there getting very nutritious leaves off of that browse. And because of that characteristic, we can use sheep and goats as a biological means for brush control all across lots of places, and not just brush, but noxious weeds as well, because weeds also have a broad leaf and they tend to be a little bit more digestible than grass, which has a little more fibrous type leaf to it. So they will actively go out and seek forbs and things like that, and they use them from everything from fire control in places to just brush management. So it's a good thing. It makes them a little different than some of our other larger ruminant species.
Right, right. Brush control is always one of the toughest things for landowners, brush control encroaching upon their lands. And you talked about palatable browse. What's our most common brush invaders in Texas, and which sheep or goats are best at helping us control
Well,
those
it's
brush?
probably going to be cedar if they get it young. You know, juniper is a very invasive with the lack of fire. You know, fire used to be a lot more common in the ecosystem, and it kept a lot of the brush, you know, suppressed. But with civilization and whatnot, we just don't have the fire like we used to. And so with young cedar, we know that these goats particularly will seek out those young cedar. Now they will, you know, they will eat some older cedar, but they're not going to eradicate an old plant. But they will certainly, you know, help with keeping the population suppressed. If you can keep them out there, you know, most of the year and let them have access to those young cedar sprouts and other brush species. You know, small young mesquite would be the same way.
And a lot of our range specialists will give the example that you need to give the goat an advantage. If you got a big cedar tree, it's hard for the goats because they're only going to eat 20 to 50% of their diet in cedar, depending on the year and the goat and the location. But little tree doesn't take them to eat very much to get that tree pushed back compared to an 8-foot tree that's got, you know, tens if not hundreds of pounds of forage.
Yep. Sheep, we say sheep and goats all the time, but they are a little bit different, really, when we think about what they eat and what percentage of their diet. So tell us a little bit about what sheep might voluntarily select versus maybe a goat.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we always think of sheep as being weed eaters. Technical term would be browse, correct? And they like to go after that browse. That's their preferred. But they break up their diet to where it's part browse, part grass, and a little bit of forbs.
Yeah.
Some estimates would say a goat likes to have half its diet in browse. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's probably right.
Okay. And so, you know, small ruminants, sheep and goats, they look a lot alike, but they have some difference in browsing habits. And then we can't forget about beef cattle in this scenario, because they're going to be the best livestock tool to manage grass, because they want a heavy grass diet.
So to really most effectively utilize our resources, we're probably talking about multi-species grazing of some sort, where we incorporate sheep, goats, and cattle into the whole grazing system. One other thing that makes sheep and goats a little more unique compared to maybe cattle is just basically the size of their rumen. These are all ruminant animals, and we'll talk about what that is a little bit later, but they basically take undigestible forage for monogastrics like you and I, and they are able to ferment that in the rumen and digest it. But the relative size of the rumen in a sheep and goat is pretty small compared to a cow. So that's another reason they require a high quality diet, and that's another reason that they, in addition to their small mouths, another reason they seek out forbs and browse is because that has a much faster rate of passage through the animal because it's more digestible. So that's another reason, you know, deer are the same way. They're just a small ruminant, just like a sheep or a goat. So.